Well, I played clarinet and saxophone and recorder, and I started on the recorder when I was 6 at school in Warwickshire, and then I got a clarinet when I was 10, and my parents sent me for lessons to John Fust, principal clarinet with the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra. He also took me to concerts every week from the age of 6, so I had a very fortunate upbringing in that sense. Heard all this wonderful music, fell in love with the clarinet, had a sort of boy crush on John Fust, and then ended up getting lessons from him. So then I went to university in Glasgow. And when I was there, I got into, well, I'd already done some improvising with records and the like, and I got into various rock bands, prog rock bands, and played quite a bit there. And then, to cut a long story short, I ended up in Edinburgh in 1980, and almost immediately started playing with, well, I first started playing with the Southside Strutters, which had Bill Jones on the trombone. He's the trombonist that Bob couldn't remember in the last interview. And on rhythm guitar, we had the future leader of the Green Party, Robin Harper, and various other luminaries of that time. And that was the first time I'd been in a proper jazz band, except on one occasion when I was living in Argyll a few years previously. The Mike Hart Scottish Society Syncopators came and played a gig at Ardfern. And I went along with my clarinet, all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and asked if I could get up and have a jam. And they, bless them, they said yes. They didn't say, "Who's this long-haired upstart?" They said, "Yes, get up." And it was just such a great experience. I sort of filed that away for future reference. What great fun it was playing with an authentic, proper jazz band. So then, as I say, ended up with the Southside Syncopators in Edinburgh. And then shortly after that, I joined Swing 80, a band which is still going today, Swing 2019. So that's how long that's been going. And that was a Django Reinhardt influenced band with Neil Monroe on guitar, John Russell on guitar, and I'm having the same trouble as Bob. I can't remember people's names.
Well, explain a little bit more about how. I'm guessing that it was a bit of a classical educational journey that you had initially.
Yeah.
And it's where you then started hearing, accessing, or thinking, hearing jazz and thinking, right, I'd quite like to do that, or whether you could just basically turn your hand to anything and you just loved playing. So a little bit more about that, if you could.
Yes, well, I had a very good classical training on clarinet, but at the same time, I was listening to such jazz hits as there were in the mainstream at the time, things like Kenny Bull, Midnight in Moscow, and Acker-Bilk, Stranger on the Shore, all that kind of stuff. And a friend of mine from school, this was this must have been when I was about 14 or 15, he had 2 LPs. One of them happened to be of Joe Venuti and Eddie Lang, and the Blue 4 and the Blue 5 playing, and I just loved that music. We both loved it and fell in love with it. So I was very much alive to jazz playing, and I used to play along with the records at home and taught. Well, I've never had any jazz lessons, so that's a process that's been going on by learning from records originally, and then, as I say, playing. Well, when I was in Argyll during the 70s, I was playing a lot of jazz-influenced music with various groups around Argyll. Not many gigs to be had in Argyll, but there we are. So that's how it started, really. And when I got to Edinburgh in 1980, it was a new chapter, really. There was a lot of jazz going on. And I was like a duck to water. Think of me as a duck.
And how did you get gigs? Was it just that the scene was so integrated that it just sort of all happened seamlessly, or did you have to? How did you build your career, as it were?
Through a succession of happy accidents, really. I got involved with the Southside Strutters because I'd come across the piano player who was a teacher at Forester High School, where I was teaching, doing peripatetic wind instrument tuition. And she got me into that band, and there I met Dave Strutt, who was the trumpet player with that band, and he was forming Swing 80 at the time, so I got in there on the ground floor. And that was brilliant, because I was with that band for, 33 years, must be, yes. So a lot of Django Reinhardt has been going in here and coming out here occasionally as well.
And have you always effectively had a day job to supplement the jazz, or have you ever been able to sort of kind of have a I suppose, a professional career?
Yes. I was delighted to give up teaching in schools, peripatetic music teaching. I gave that up in 1997, thanks to my lady wife, who said, you're kind of wasting your time. Let's try and get by with a little less money and see if you can make it, make a living. No, I wasn't looking for the heights of fame, but making a living was what we were aiming for, she and I. And that's worked very well since then. I haven't done a hand's turn since 1997. Full-time layabout.
From 97, did
Yes.
you then just work full-time as a jazz musician?
Yes.
So how did you, was that then because you started touring, you started doing how did you add, how did you manage that,
I
as
see.
it were?
Yeah, well, I've never really done much touring. It just hasn't worked out that way. But there has been, in fact, a thriving jazz scene in Edinburgh since that time. In fact, since the early 80s, when I happened to arrive in Edinburgh, Mike Hart, I and many other people owe him a great debt of thanks for starting the Edinburgh Jazz Festival, and then that became a kind of an impetus for jazz, and it built, as you know, it's built up to the present day, where it's an enormous affair. When it started, it was just, it was local bands with one foreign band coming in. So I would like to acknowledge that was, I think that did a great amount for many people's careers, and including mine. When I left teaching in 97, I discovered that I could actually, had just about enough gigs, had a weekly residency with Swing 97, and various other gigs with other people. At the same time, I was arranging work for various bands, and also I managed to get the occasional composition commission, which was very good. Back in 2002, I got a Creative Scotland Award, and that was effectively, it was a commission to write a piece for a 5-movement piece for full orchestra and 4 bagpipes. That took me a few years to complete, and it's never actually been performed in its entirety yet. But that, I suppose, what I'm saying is I was getting a name. I was getting a name, and I was finding it easier to get gigs, and finding it easier to get commissions and arranging work as well. Consequently.
And do you think that there's the same opportunities for young jazz players coming in at the moment? Is Edinburgh still as robust, and is there still that sort of ability to take on and rise up?
I'm not sure. I'm not that much in touch with the scene. You've heard of the song "Don't Get Around Much Anymore." That's me. But I do know that there are a lot more young people appearing at gigs where I'm playing traditional style jazz, and it seems to have a great popularity these days. Alison Affleck, amongst others, is doing a great deal to popularize this kind of music for a younger audience, and she has old folk like me in her band as well, so that helps. I think that the situation with education is very different these days. If you want to play jazz, you can go somewhere like here, and people like HAFTA can tell you how to do it and how not to do it. And that's great, because when I got to university in Glasgow, music department in 1969, you're not allowed to play any jazz. No jazz, nothing. No rock, no jazz, nothing except Palestrina and the like. So there's been a transformation in the education scene, and I think that's helping young people to come through and opening their eyes to the fact that jazz is still a music that's developing. It's developing in all directions. As Duke Ellington said, it's a big tree, and the branches go all over the place.
Tell me more, if you can, about who you played with, who was maybe visiting to Edinburgh, and how that kind of helped develop or was stimulating, or which particular performances you remember for whatever reasons, so if you can.
There's a wonderful Roma guitarist called Fabi Lefertin, who plays very much in the style of Django Reinhardt, and he was in 1986, Swing 86, did a few gigs with him, and that was very inspiring indeed. We also played with, well, thanks to the Edinburgh Jazz Festival, we played with Memphis Slim, Digby Fairweather, George Washing Machine, Warren Vacher, all sorts of visiting artists. It doesn't tend to happen outside, well, at least not to me, outside the Edinburgh Festival, because that is a feature of the Edinburgh Festival, people coming in and playing with local bands. So apart from that, I've collaborated with a lot of great musicians. I was on John Renbourn's, a couple of John Renbourn's albums, and I got to know him. Various people. My memory fails me, as often happens.